Hello, welcome to this panel discussion. My name is Olaf Adam. I'm the editor of Hi-Fi.de. Stefan and the High-End Society were kind enough to invite me to host this panel discussion about the future of hi-fi. With me, I start here. Luba, I've known you for 15 years. I still will butcher your name. Ljubica Miodragovic from Serbia.
You got it right, but you can call me Luba.
Okay.
That's my nickname.
Hi-Files magazine and vice president of ISA.
Yes.
To my left, does he need an introduction? Michael Framer.
Everybody needs an introduction.
Editor at large at Absolute Sounds and owner-editor of TrackingAngle.com.
That's true.
And to his left, Stuart Smith from the Hi-Fi website with the best name in the world, Hi-Fi Pig. I'll sit down now. What did you think of my little intro?
With the music?
Yeah.
I think you planned this for years.
I planned this for 2 days because I had to pick up the... No, of course, I chose the song and the product for a reason. Here we are talking about the future of hi-fi, and it's four relatively old men. The boys are back in town. This is one of the things I think we need to discuss. What's the future of hi-fi? Is it white men? I don't think so. Also, this, what we just had, probably sold out in numbers every single product on the show. I'm not sure if you know, the company who licensed the Marshall brand has just bought Marshall amplification because they're selling so much of them. Michael, you've been in the hi-fi industry for...
I started writing for the Absolute Sound in '86. I started buying hi-fi when I was 12 or 10 or whatever.
All right. When you started, were you thinking about the future of hi-fi? What would you see hi-fi develop into? And are we there, or did it turn out differently?
Everybody up here is going to try to tell you what the future is, and if they really know what it is, they'd be at a racetrack right now, and we're not at a racetrack. But I just want to read you something I wrote in 1984, and I have it here if anybody wants to see it. And when this was published in Music Connection magazine in Los Angeles, the editor was so upset by this, it said at the top, "This opinion does not reflect the opinions of the publisher or the editor of the magazine." And I wrote, "Compact discs are not the future, they don't sound better than records, and soon very few people will still have CD players." Okay? So that was '84. It took a long time for that to come true, but it came true. But as far as diversity, I got corralled into answering that question at Axpona. And at Axpona in Chicago, there were more black people there and Asian people there than I've seen at a hi-fi show in a really long time, and that was really, really good to see.
I'm sorry, I just remember that I forgot 2 housekeeping items. First of all, I have to thank and mention John Darko, darkoaudio.com, who was kind enough to let us borrow the term futurefy, which he coined, and he wrote a piece about it, what he means about with the term, so go to darko.audio, check this out. Other than that, please turn down your mobile phones. Sorry for that. Stuart,
yes.
You've been not around quite as long as Michael, but for a while. What needs to change in hi-fi? Your opinion?
Lots. I think the future of hi-fi is, if you look at the trends, are small speakers, wireless speakers, and streaming for the mass market. And I think the big thing with the way that we consume music has changed. The mass market consumes music. They don't sit down and enjoy music in the same way that we would have enjoyed it in the 80s, 70s, and what have you. It's throwaway. There is so much choice that it's impossible to make informed decisions about music. And it is the future. Streaming is the future. And I use Cobas, I use Roon, and all the rest of it. But I think we need to slow down in lots of ways in our lives. And I think we need to slow down in the way that we enjoy and consume music. Whether we do that or not is a different matter. And where I see it going is small speakers that are wireless and connected and with screens and all the rest of it that we see day in, day out. The high end is a different matter, which I'm sure we'll come on to later on in the discussion. But yeah, it's changing, and it's changing very quickly, and it's going to a way that we're consuming more and more and more without taking time to perhaps enjoy it in the way that we should.
Luba, Stu was talking about the mass market. What we just had down here is mass market. Is that hi-fi? Or turning the question around, is hi-fi a mass market thing, or is hi-fi by definition a specialized market?
Well, it is a niche, but what you represented us here was mono. So from my perspective, that's
Claims
not hi-fi.
differently.
Okay, but that's not hi-fi. That's not a proper hi-fi. I think that if we look into the future, we have nothing to worry about. If you compare hi-fi with different industries like photography or in-car electronics, they are having problems. We don't. So if you look at like 10 years in advance, high-end will be there, and cheap hi-fi will also be there. Let's not forget like true wireless headphones. There was an article that they last for like 2 years because you lose them all the time and the battery is, decreasing all the time. So this is like a mass market that just speeds up everything. As Stuart said, we need to slow down, but there are some part of our industry that are actually accelerating all the time because you're going to buy them every year. When you have a turntable, you don't change your turntable every year, right?
Well, I do. No, I don't.
Some do. No,
Can I just add something to this?
absolutely.
So, for some perspective. So when I got to college, which was in 1964, there were 64 kids on the floor in my dormitory. That was at night. No, there were 64 beds and people lived in them. There were only 2 people with real stereos of the 64. There was me and a kid named Lincoln Chang who had a really good stereo in the dormitory. And the rest of the kids, if they had anything, they had a flip-down Sears changer, which is the equivalent of that today. So the number of people who were really into good sound, and I ran into this guy, Lincoln, I met up with him again after 50 years, it was incredible, and he's still into audio. But the number of people that are really going to be into high-end audio, the percentage-wise, is probably the same now. It may be a little bit higher than it was then. There were only a couple of kids that were into it, and the rest of them, even if they came into our dorm room and heard it, they went back to their Sears changer, and that's how they listened to music. So I don't think that's going to change, and I think that the percentage of people who appreciate the kind of good sound that you hear here and you see here that costs a lot of money is going to remain fairly stable. It's not going to go down, and it's probably not going to go up. If anything, it'll go up a little bit. And I think vinyl is bringing, you were talking about people slowing down. That's what, I'm hanging out with people in their 30s and 40s now, which is fun. It's because when I hang around with people my age, all they talk about is their diseases, their people that died. I don't want to hear about that stuff. I'd rather hang out with kids that are 30 and 40 who are playing good music, and they have like big Klipschorns and McIntosh tube amplifiers and a turntable, and the TV is off in some other room and they don't watch it. And they're living now the way I lived in the 70s, and it's fantastic to see that. And I think vinyl is making kids do what you said, slow down, put a record on, read the jacket, and they get into the Tone Poet records, records that are all analog, and there's something about it that hits their brain, and they like it. I'm just so optimistic right now about what's going on. So,
Yeah, but follow-up question to that. Is the future of hi-fi actually not changing and being like in the 70s?
it's like, what's the future of classical music? It's Beethoven, Bach, Brahms. I mean, that's going to stay. And there's new music also. But I think the idea of a couple of big speakers and something to play it back on, and an amplifier, what you see here, that's hi-fi to me. And
Okay.
the rest of the stuff, it's great. I have all this stuff. I have tiny little speakers that sound great and wireless. I have all this stuff. I've got Roon, I've got all that. But when I want to listen to music, just sit and listen, it's always a record. But that's me. But a lot of people.
Okay, so Luba and Michael both mentioned the stereo, the 2 speakers as part of the definition of hi-fi. Is that something you would agree to, Stu?
Yeah, that's what I would call hi-fi, and I sort of agree and yet disagree with you on it being a niche, which I think is what you were saying. I think when I grew up, everybody seemed to have a hi-fi, 2 speakers, and a stereo at home. And that just doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Everybody's streaming to a one-box Sonos or whatever. And I don't know where that changed. I don't know if it changed in the 80s and it became oversaturated. When I was at school, every boy, every white boy, wanted a hi-fi, and they dreamt that the hi-fi was a dual turntable, a NAD amp, and a pair of Keffel Wharfdale speakers. That isn't there anymore. That entry level is there, but it's not quite the same, and it's not marketed the same. And I think we talked about the high end. High end, I think, in my opinion, is pushing itself further and further into a niche within a niche and becoming more unobtainable. And I think that puts some people off. I also think it's aspirational to some people. And I don't know where you find that balance of what becomes unobtainable to the point where people lose interest, and where it inspires people to get into hi-fi and have 2 speakers and a hi-fi.
Well, I think that, where hi-fi ends and high-end begins is actually something that we will touch upon later again. I have another question in mind. Do you think that you need hi-fi or good sound to enjoy music?
Yes, I do. To consume music, I don't think you do. I think you can have a little box and all the rest of it. But to connect on an emotional level, I'm doing a series of talks on the sub £5,000 systems. And I mentioned in the first one I did yesterday that we can all access music in a relatively high quality now. But to really connect emotionally, which is why we listen to music and why we slow down and sit down and enjoy music, you do need a better quality connection, and that comes through higher end hi-fi.
Okay. Luba, sorry, get back to you in a minute. Luba, you are, by some margin, the youngest of us. You do have friends that are not in the hi-fi industry.
You know, the Djokovic said 35 is the new 25.
Yeah, so welcome to the new... Nah, we're not talking numbers here. So what I was going at is your friends that are not in the hi-fi industry, how many of them have a hi-fi system that's following the definition that we just came up with?
Actually, quite a lot. And a lot of them, they have like inherited their fathers or grandfathers in some equipment. So I was quite shocked when they send me a picture and they say, I want to buy something new, what can I do? And I see that they have like really good equipment. So
Old.
Yeah, it's old, yeah. But my concern is that if we look at younger generation and their concentration is decreasing all the time. Maybe you saw there's some data that they used to have like 12 seconds. Now we have 8 seconds of concentration to read something, and then you just...
It's a little less than a goldfish.
Goldfish, yeah. And how many, youngsters actually have that kind of peace to sit down, to play vinyl or whatever? They just listen to music for like 10 seconds, and they just switch to another one. It's just completely ridiculous from our perspective. So... I'm not worried about hi-fi. I'm worried about music, artificial intelligence in music, listening to, Freddie Mercury sounding like Nirvana. Maybe you saw that. It was like they do crazy stuff. So I don't have a point now. I just lost my my concentration.
Because you're young.
Well, you made a very good point about when you were growing up that everybody had a real stereo. And I think that coincides with music being really good. And I remember in the 70s, if you read Rolling Stone, every other ad was for a hi-fi. And if you read even National Geographic, there were ads for hi-fi. And then as music got worse, and it got worse, production got worse, that all seemed to go away. And all the hi-fi companies stopped advertising in mainstream press.
I sort of disagree with the point that music got worse. I listen to a lot of new music, and I think production has got worse.
Now it's gotten better again. It's gone up the other way.
I think the point of music being better in the generation that you grow up is absolutely valid. But the point is, we aren't, at our age, we aren't as connected to new music as we're not in that scene anymore.
Well, I try to keep up with that stuff. So
I try.
Billie Eilish is great recording. You know, it recorded in a bedroom, but they have the values of making a good recording, and those are good recordings.
One of the questions I wanted to ask was, you brought up the point of people not having concentration anymore. Do you think that's a symptom of the technology pushing people to not have that connection, or is it just a societal thing?
I think we should all grab our phones and see how many hours we spend per day on our smartphones. It's just insane.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we can all agree. First time I went on TikTok, that was crazy. So, but we're not. Maybe that would go a little bit too far now. Michael, you mentioned hi-fi. Yeah, that people listen to hi-fi as it was in the 70s. My company, we have a lot of young people working there, and they're all into vinyl. Isn't that a bit strange that one of the oldest technologies that we still have around is bringing in young people into the hi-fi? Isn't that? I was surprised by that. I like it because I do like my vinyl as well. But is that a good thing?
It's a great thing, and I thought it was going to happen, and I predicted. And everything you're saying that you're concerned about, this switching, this move, these kids can't get away from that because it's there. But if they put a record on, if a kid comes over to a friend's house and he's got a turntable and the kid says, listen to this record, and they sit there and they listen to it, that's like a new thing for them. And then they sit for 20 minutes. At the end of 20 minutes, they're like, whew, because they're caught up in this treadmill of this thing, and all the kids are doing it, so they're all doing it. And if one kid says, listen to this, and they all slow down, that's a good feeling, you know. It's just, and that feeling doesn't change with age or time or anything. And that's why, and vinyl has this sound to it. I don't know what exactly it is, but I met this guy in Abu Dhabi who's all digital. He wanted to meet me, so he flew me over there. And I brought a stick, digitized vinyl, and I gave it to him. And he called me a week later and said, my wife and I are sitting there listening to these vinyl rips. That's all we listen to. Why is that? And I said, I don't know, but I know that's what would happen if I gave you this stick. So, and I had this discussion yesterday with Jim Anderson, and we tried to figure this out, why that was. I'm not sure we figured it out, really. But it's true, and I think this is an antidote to this, is putting on the record and listening to it.
I think if we actually manage to figure out the future of hi-fi on this stage, then we've found a company right away, get very rich very fast. But we can at least try. Luba, do you listen to vinyl yourself?
No.
Okay. When we see that vinyl is actually bringing young people, new people into hi-fi, older people back to hi-fi because they like the covers, the haptic aspect of it. How can we combine that very old school technology with the modern comfort of accessing music, all music everywhere, every time that we got used to?
I don't know. I know that a lot of my friends, they want to buy a turntable, but they want to have automatic turntable. It's like, they're like, I have to pay like €1,000, and then I have to do everything by myself. We're becoming that lazy. So it's not no, seriously, it's not a matter, they don't ask about the quality or the color or whatever, or the design. They just want the convenience, which is actually what streaming is, offering us. Just, one click and you can listen whatever you want. So vinyl, it's a nice thing, but it takes some effort, it takes some passion, right? I think that we all have some kind of responsibility towards younger generation to teach them, what is vinyl, what is hi-fi, what is a proper hi-fi. When I was a kid, my father had a very small Fisher component system with a turntable. But
The brown one?
No, it was silver.
Okay.
Silver.
Mine was brown.
And I wasn't allowed to touch it. So I think this is the thing, that we need to change this. We should, teach younger generation what is hi-fi, and if they press a button, nothing will get broken, right?
Stu?
Yeah, I have two.
I heard you.
I have two kids, and they grew up with relatively high-end hi-fi in the house all the time. Neither of them want record players. Neither of them are particularly interested in that. Yeah, absolutely. So they're reacting against that, I think. But they're happy with the Sonos, and
How old are they?
28 and 25.
Okay, it's too late for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
The lost generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I remember what was my biggest fun was to press the loudness button. That was like, wow.
Do we maybe instead need to teach them about music?
Well, music education is one of the first things that gets cut in schools, any kind of culture, especially in America where culture is disdained by certain groups of people. I won't get into politics. And so that gets cut first, and it's really a shame that that happens. But one of the things that's great about all this is it wasn't our business that tried to teach young people about turntables. It grew from the bottom. It wasn't us pushing turntables on them, you can be sure. But they found it somehow, and it spread. And I remember in the 90s with Joe Harley, who's the tone poet, we would sit there and say, vinyl can make a comeback. If only these kids could hear it. If they would hear it, they might want it. And the way they heard it was not from us pushing it on them, but it was from them discovering it from a friend or whatever, and then it spreads virally. And a viral spreading of something like this is much better than trying to do it from the top down. What we have to do is educate them about how to take care of their records and how to, value them and not let them get disposed badly by having scratches all over them. But as far as them getting into it, they found it on their own, which is fantastic.
But one thing, they discovered headphones by their own. So we don't have to put any pressure and influence. They all want to have headphones. So it's, that part of industry is quite good.
I think headphones and vinyl are what's going to lead kids into better hi-fi, because there's great sounding headphones, and even MP3s. To pull down record changes. A Sears record changer in the 70s was a terrible sounding thing. It made records sound awful. So today, even the least good digital audio technology has certain qualities that we wish that kids heard in the 70s and 60s on bad sounding stereos they didn't hear. So all of this, to me, leads to our business, if we play it right, of them getting into better and better sound.
Maybe another example from my work experience. As I said, we have a lot of young people. One of our photographers just turned 21. And we were testing, I think it was the DeviLA, not something that follows this definition of hi-fi, but decent sounding. And I played something of Leonard Cohen's last album. And he was sitting down and said, yeah, sounds nice. I told him, he recorded that sitting down in his living room with his son, knowing that he would die soon.
I have pictures of that on my phone.
Yeah, and he looked at me and went, wow. And then I could see that he started listening. So this is something that I try to get them through the music and through the stories and through the emotions that music present. Stu, I know you're coming from the music side. Is that something that the industry can maybe? We talked about technology, what is hi-fi, but maybe as an industry we need to become better in talking about music instead of technology?
Yeah, I think the thing that connects all the systems that are out there, they all play music, whether it's a little box, whether it's a £50,000 turntable or not. They all play music, and that's the connection between everything, and that's why we're here. And I think you're right, if we can educate but also listen to young people about the music that they listen to, and without us being prescriptive of this is right, that is right, this is how you do it, this is how you don't do it. Because, as you said, my kids have reacted against that and me being prescriptive, and I think there is a natural, children do that against authority or whatever, and do the opposite of what we tell them. So if we say vinyl is great, you must listen to vinyl, they will not follow that. They will listen to MP3s. And we've mentioned the whole portable culture and screens and all the rest of it. That's what they want. That's what they want, access to everything all the time. I hate it. It's just overwhelming. But they seem to be able to, because they've got 8 seconds rather than 10 seconds attention span, they want that constant bombardment.
And that's not a normal state for people of any age.
Absolutely
And
not.
that's why when you give them, when something comes along that provides relief from that, they will take it. That's what's happening.
To an extent, I agree that that is what is needed, but whether or not that is, we can prescribe that as much as we want, but whether or not they take that medicine is a completely different matter.
Sure. You know, I'm friends with Harold Bronson, who started Rhino Records, and I went to his house one day, and we were looking at all his memorabilia. His walls are covered with, you know, you wouldn't believe pictures of him with everybody and everyone. And then I passed his son's room, and I looked at him and said, "So what kind of music do you like?" And the kid looked at him and said, "Music sucks." But he's come around. Now he's, 30. Now he likes music.
When I first heard I was going to be involved in this, I was at the Deluxe Audio Show in the UK, and we went out for dinner at the night time, and a young guy who by his appearance, I assumed that he was into music. He looked half goth, if that makes sense, so you assume that he's into music. And I asked the question, "What kind of music do you like?" He said, "I don't listen to music." "Well, what do you mean you don't listen to music?" "Well, I don't listen to any music." I said, "Well, do you know X, Y, Z?" I can't remember the band that I said. We said, "Well, yeah, but that's not... I listen to 70s and 80s music, but all my friends listen to modern music." And he assumed, because he was into 70s and 80s music, that somehow wasn't being into music, which I thought a really weird thing.
It's a bit weird, yeah. The show that we are at is called The High End, and maybe that's something we need to touch upon for a little bit. Luba, taking into account what we now talked about, the people who are now in their 20s discover music and discover hi-fi through vinyl, but still grew up with TikTok, Instagram, all that, and all the streaming services. Once they had a career, have the money, what will their high end look like in 20 years?
Tough question. First thing is that the good news is that when you walk here, you will find several turntables with Wi-Fi, so they can connect. Your kids can connect turntable to their Sonos, and it comes from JBL and Project and many other brands. So that's a good thing that they can have period of transition. Only matter is the matter of money. I think that hi-fi is toys for boys. So when we get older and we get more money, it's just a matter of our priorities. Are we going to spend money on cars or on high-end? And
I don't think it's that kind of question. Is it a new phone or is it a new turntable? A new phone is 1,200, 1,400 euros for the new iPhone. That is a good hi-fi. That is a reasonable quality turntable. But they're going to choose the iPhone 90% of the time over the turntable.
And they're going to choose 200 plastic turntable, right?
Yeah.
200 euro.
Yeah.
If we get 10%, we're doing okay.
Absolutely.
I was about to say
Agreed.
10% would be really good. But you mentioned another thing that brings me back to how we started. You said it's boys for toys. That immediately cuts out 50% plus of the target audience, doesn't it?
Yes, but that's sorry, but that's just the truth.
I don't think it is. I pulled some figures from before we were doing this. 46 in 2020. In 2020, 46 point whatever percent of downloaded music was downloaded by women. So they are into the music. It's how we get them interested in the toys.
There were two women I met at a hi-fi show who were with the Houston Audio Society. And I'll admit this, it's horrible, but they were traveling together. One was a geologist and one was an electrical engineer. And I assumed they were a couple. That's just because that's the assumption. It's a terrible assumption, but I made it. Turns out they're both married to men who hate hi-fi, and they have their hi-fis in the bedrooms because the husbands won't allow them to have the hi-fi in the living room. So we can't stereotype anybody or anything. There are actually more. I meet lots of women that are into this. They don't come to hi-fi shows.
Well, it's quite interesting. I wasn't supposed to be doing this. my wife Lynette was supposed to be doing this. She was the person that was asked to do this, and we do the show together, and we walk into a room together. The natural thing is for the person running the room to come up to me and ask me if I'm interested in X, Y, Z. And I go, no, she's the person that knows about hi-fi, speak to her. And it's, oh, right, okay.
That's our problem. That's our
Yeah.
problem.
And what do we do to change that?
I will tell you, 98% of my subscribers of my printing magazine are male.
Yeah.
And I started my show in 2008, and I noticed that the audience was completely, just men. And then I decided to make it free entrance for the ladies.
Okay.
And it worked. It worked. So it's like maybe 60-40 now. And because at the end, we all know what is a wife acceptance factor, because they're going to decide for us what can get into the home, because it's a piece of furniture. And the truth is that they make, in many cases, they make decisions for us. If you're looking like soundbars, we never talked about soundbars, which were a big thing in the last few years. It kind of also depends, you cannot have too big soundbar below your TV, or they're going to decide for you, for your home, how big is your TV, right?
Is that
I sort of disagree with that. I think decisions made in the home are not made by the wife or the husband. Surely it's more, in my house anyway, it's more of a joint decision, surely?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
But you have a special case, right?
Yeah, I do have a bit of a special case, but I naturally assume that that's how partnerships work. But on the getting the women back into hi-fi, Lynette, Mrs. Hi-Fi Pig, runs the Women in Hi-Fi group, and they meet at shows throughout the world and all the rest of it. And that's for people in the industry, for people women that are into hi-fi. And year on year, that the people that go to the meeting at High End, which I think is tomorrow in the beer garden, whenever it is, I'm not allowed there, obviously. But the number of women that have joined that group over the year and have joined the Facebook group has grown and grown and grown. And that can only be a good thing for the industry. And I think what might be a good idea, we've got the website womeninhifi.com, is to bring perhaps standards and for companies to employ more women and get them on the coalface and be customer facing perhaps.
That's Michael, question for you. Shouldn't be there a more natural way to well, as we learned, people of all genders and ages are interested in music, but they're not all of them are interested in hi-fi. So how do we change that instead of employment laws that are good, but I don't think that will help on the buyer side?
I don't think there need to be laws, but if somebody has a culture in their workplace that is more inclusive, that can only be a good thing. I don't think laws is the right way to go.
The interesting thing is there are more women in music production and mastering than there are in this side of it, which is really interesting. So, you got Cookie Marenko with her DSD site, and there are all these mastering engineers that you can look up, women that are doing this, and they're really good at it. What we need to do is probably get them to come to these shows and invite other women to come to these shows, and I don't know exactly how you do that, but I think if you went to a photography show, everybody has a camera, all women take pictures, but how many of them are into photography and would go to a photography show? Probably a small percentage, and that's just something, I don't know whether it's genetic or cultural, but you're not going to change it beyond a certain point. We can certainly make it more welcoming and probably improve the ratio, but I think it's always going to be, it's a men's thing,
But
probably.
just to circle around, would not maybe, if the products are a bit nicer and make music easy accessible, still sound good, wouldn't that be a way to make people interested in hi-fi that currently are not, including women? And I know a lot of men who are absolutely not interested in hi-fi because they can't be bothered.
I think we're going maybe in the wrong direction with all this gender discussion. I had some experiences because you mentioned the music production and everything. I had 24 years ago, I was in a class for sound design, and I learned how to mix. It was a basic course, nothing special. So I wouldn't do that today. And at that time, that was quite interesting. You had like 24 channels or more. You can do a lot of things with computer or not, or you can. But nowadays, they are mixing music, like maybe I read that somewhere on the of this agenda, that they're mixing music to sound good on some smartphones. I had the bad luck that my office in my hometown has a musical studio right next door, and that music is just repetitive all the time and just nightmare. I mean, can you compare like people making productions for Bohemian Rhapsody, you know, which is like a masterpiece, compared to nowadays, which is like the music is just awful.
You know, the great recordings of the 50s and 60s were made to sound as good as they could sound on the best sounding gear. And somehow those recordings still sound great in the car and on Walkman and streaming. And
Yep.
when you make recordings to sound good on headphones, it's the stupidest concept because it doesn't sound good anyplace else. It's just stupid.
Yeah, but at every end of the production, they were testing the sound. How does it sound on mono because of the radio? So
But isn't that only for a certain type of music? I mean, we have, yes, but there was always bad mass market pop music, and there's always been music that tried to be a bit more, and I think we still have that, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah, absolutely. London Grammar, we just spoke about it in a meeting prior. They're around for a while, but it's Billie Eilish. I love what she does with sound. It's not music I necessarily will listen to every day, but it's interesting. So
I also think a lot of the production values that go into techno, which is essentially throwaway music, because it's by its very nature it is transient. A lot of the work that goes into the production of techno it's really well produced. Look at the Daft Punk Random Access Memories. It's beautifully produced.
It is.
An album called Dusty Kid 3 is an incredibly produced album that was fed through a reel-to-reel machine and then re-recorded digitally, so it had that analog feel but wasn't analog in its production. So I think the production values are still there in some kinds of music, but like you said, there has always been that throwaway pop, and I don't think that's really changed. I think what has changed is the sheer volume of music. It's overwhelming, the amount of choice that is out there for people, and how you can make an informed choice of what is good sounding and what is bad sounding, when you listen to it through a little box, and when there is just so much of it, it's impossible.
The same
So-
is true
sorry,
of streaming video. I mean, movies.
Absolutely.
There's so many movies that you could watch that you get paralyzed and you watch none of them because there's too much. But that's just the way the culture
Yeah,
is.
I went online.
I'm very sorry, guys. I have to interrupt to allow some time for questions and answers. We need to wrap up. So starting with you, Stu, if you can, what's the future of hi-fi? In a few words.
I think the future of hi-fi is mass market is going to be screen-based and wireless-based. Where that is beyond that, I don't know. I think the high end is going to further push itself into a niche within a niche and become more unobtainable for the masses, because people are wanting to make it more expensive all the time. And I understand that. I don't necessarily think it's a good thing.
Michael,
I
same
think that's
question
a
for
very
you.
British perspective that I just don't agree with, and I don't see it that way. So I think hi-fi, well, that kind of stuff is not hi-fi. That's just music consumption. Hi-fi starts to me with 2 speakers and a good source, and it doesn't have to be expensive. And right now you can get a good stereo for not that much money. You can get a decent stereo. But stereo hi-fi is always going to be 2 speakers, a good source, and consuming it by listening, sitting down and listening to it. That's not going away. and I think it's always going to be here. But interesting thing is car stereo is better and better all the time. So when you rent a car, a guy rents a car who knows nothing about music, and he gets in the car, and all of a sudden, it sounds great. That's good. All these companies here are doing car stereo things, and that's a reach-out program that's good for their brand, but it's also good for our hobby. And so I think the future of hi-fi is good, and I think it's going to be 2 speakers and a good source and a turntable or whatever. So.
Okay. Luba.
I think the future will be streaming, because if you look at the numbers, like they're increasing like 20% every year. And I think that's a very good thing, because that's the way how to bring up the new people into hi-fi, because they don't have to buy source amplifier and loudspeakers. They can just buy active loudspeaker with streaming integrated,
Which is a good source.
which is a good source, and there's no problem with it. So I think future will be streaming, and that's something that will bring more and more people into hi-fi. Convenience.
Okay. Guys, thank you. If there's any questions in the audience, this gentleman there has a microphone for you.
We did a damn good job as far as I can see.
Or we tired them in a stupor. So,
To go around the room and ask them questions and see
yeah,
if we get the answers.
Dimi, come on. What's the future of hi-fi from your perspective? Good idea. Sorry for that.
No, no problem. I also think it's streaming, and it's very important. And I think the future is also at the side of the companies, what you mentioned, maybe not to bring products so expensive as they do right now. If they will, and what we see here at the high end, like the Sounds Clever concept, that's very important to bring people to hi-fi in the future.
The reason why, thank you, Dimi. The reason why I picked him is that he will do a similar talk tomorrow, same time. Is it this room, 10 o'clock, for the German in German language. So if you understand both languages, please do that. Are there any more questions? There's one. Okay. 2 actually. Saw you.
Yeah, so everybody's telling that streaming is the future, and I enjoy streaming, and I find new music through streaming, which is very fine. But I think people want something in their hands, and they want something to identify with when they listen to music. And so, is there for me, there is definitely a future for physical. Accessible music that I can take home, and I can read stuff on the cover and stuff like that. And my question is, do you see any chance for a digital physical data that is better quality and is as good as let's say a vinyl LP? Will we get there?
Blu-ray discs
Yeah?
sound great.
I've often wondered why we don't have records with sleeves and all the rest of it on SD cards.
Yeah.
So you've got that collection part,
Yeah.
and you've got, because we all like owning something. I don't like this not having a physical thing
Exactly.
that I own.
Yeah.
And I didn't get on with streaming at all, and I was very anti-streaming for years and years and years. And then I discovered Roon.
Yeah.
And that gives you, because you have that screen, and that's why I said I think the future is
Yeah.
screen-based. You do have that screen, and you have that physicality of being able to read about the artist and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And that gives you that that degree of physicality about it.
Gives you part of it.
It doesn't
But
give
you know
it
what?
all.
One problem with Roon and all the streaming is that they'll put up a version of a record, a mix or a master of a record, and you really like that one, and you have it on Roon, and now you
Exactly.
own it sort of because it's on your thing. And then they said, well, we're going to do a remaster of that, and they put that one in place of the one you liked, and the one they put on there sucks. And then what do? You're stuck with what they've just done.
Exactly.
So whereas you
Yeah.
buy the record, and you have that record, no one's taking it away from you. And when you play it, no one's looking at what you're streaming and sending you advertising. It's like
Exactly.
weird.
Yeah.
All right.
That's totally my point. Yeah.
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 No, I agree.
Microphone behind you. There's some. Okay. Thank you. Did that answer your question? Sorry.
My
Yeah,
English
okay.
is not so good, but you spoke about the quality and the future of the hi-fi from the industrial point of view. But could you define from the consumer point of view, what is the quality of what he hears? You spoke about the sound, you spoke about the music, but what is in terms of consumer, female or young guys, but
Yeah.
what is the quality for them? Not only wireless, not only lazy players, but what do they stand for? What is their expectation about quality?
About quality, their expectation about quality of hi-fi.
Experience.
Yeah.
What is the experience they want to live with your products in the future?
Anyone?
I think it's quite individual, so I cannot, make a.
I think people want access to all things at all times, and I'm 55, I think, and I find that completely overwhelming. But young people really want that. I'll give an example. I went online to buy, of all things, a torch, a flashlight, and I gave up. There was just so much choice, and that's how I find streaming. And I think one of the things that we've lost, and you mentioned it in part with the thing with cars, people get into their cars, and yeah, they might have a CD player in there, but that's where I listen to radio. And I don't think we listen to radio enough anymore and have DJs that are informing our opinions about music, because we have an algorithm that learns what we like and feeds us more of what we like in lots, not just music, in lots of aspects of our lives. And it's just reinforcing what we already like, rather than being introduced to new experiences and, in our case, new music. And I think radio, with the Sounds Clever thing, I chose the amplifier that I've chosen specifically because it has Bluetooth on there and it has radio on there. And I think we need to get back to listening to and being informed by radio, and that's just my opinion.
And people on the radio,
And people.
who curate music for people and help them find new music. Yeah, the
Absolutely.
algorithm thing is poison because it just
Absolutely.
reinforces whatever crap you like.
Absolutely.
People on radio, they know stuff about music, right?
Yes.
It's I think, similar to the Leonard Cohen example I just gave. It's giving context to music, and making the emotional aspect of music more accessible. This is actually a quality that better sound does, and it's amazing to work with young people who experience that kind of sound quality for the first time in their life, and to see the goosebumps. They don't have to say anything. You notice, and this is something they will not look back. I spoiled them. Anyway, there was a question in the back.
So I just wanted to mention that. I just wanted to mention that 1882 was when the turntable was invented, and about, let's say, 1982, the CDs came out, and the streaming is since something like 1989 in Sweden, Spotify. So we have to, of course, invest into the new streaming technology and to look into things like the router gets a new power supply and all kind of things we are not used to. But even today, streaming can be much better already than vinyl. Sorry, Michael, if I'm mentioning that.
I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah. And I think in 2023, it's not the best idea to still insist into scratching the sound out of a plastic groove. So we should invest more brain and more things into streaming and see to get it in equality for our side of hi-fi, absolute sound and all that stuff. And we should also be very delighted that today you get a streamer for $180, which is a very, very decent thing. And 5 years ago, it was $20,000, the same kind of quality. So I think that we should invest. And I would love to hear more reviews of Michael Framer about the best streamers.
I reviewed a digital Ethernet switch that cost $3,000, and I easily heard the difference. It
Yeah,
was
but the Ethernet
ridiculous,
switch
and
should
I
be
wrote
below
about
500.
it, much
We
to the
agree.
derision of a lot of people, but I heard it.
Okay.
It wasn't hard to hear. But no, I review digital stuff. You know, it's funny because I write about vinyl, that's my thing, but that's not all I do. It's like my wife is in the dog world, she shows dogs, and the dog judge has to put the dog on the table, and one of the tasks the judge has to do is feel if the dog's testicles have dropped. That judge doesn't walk around the street feeling dogs' testicles. You know what I'm saying? So I cover digital and analog, even though my big thing is that.
Stefan is going to tell us off for taking too long.
No. This is not the reason, but I don't know why exactly, but I also like to say that part of the future of hi-fi also starts here. This is very important in my show, because I think bringing together people like what we have here right now with this knowledge and so on is very important, and that we speak about it, and that we've invented the Sounds Clever thing, because so many people visiting this show the last year, especially the last year, they come to the show, and all the manufacturers which are normally not in these higher price classes only presented the higher price class. It was a monitor audio for 40,000 euro, then it was a DALI for 60,000 euro, then it was an audio physic for even over 100,000 euro. That's why we have invented the Sounds Clever concept, to tell the people, you can come to our show and you find something for you. And this is one of my wishes also for your magazine, bring that, not with the exact name, bring that also to the people out there. Give them the idea, it's affordable also for you. I think this is one of the very important things for the next years also.
I think this is perfect. I think we can all agree on that, and that's probably, thank you, Stefan, that's probably a perfect way to end this. Sounds Clever is at the other end, a room K4. Stu's playing a system there, I'm playing a system there, Stereo Magazine from Germany, and Low Beats from Germany is playing a system there, all below 5,000. Ours the cheapest, of course. I need to.
But you know, the point is, this is a hi-fi show, and it's like a car show. So you may go to the car show, you're going to buy a Kia or something you can afford. Yeah, you look at those cars, but you're also there to see the show cars, and this is a show you have to enjoy your fantasy, even if you can't afford this stuff. You just go enjoy the expensive stuff.
Also
But
true.
it's all, the cheap stuff is all here, inexpensive stuff is all here too. And if you're really looking to put together an inexpensive system, you'll find it all here, and you can find that. And the same is online on magazines, covering inexpensive gear. We cover inexpensive gear on my website, trackangle.com. We expensive gear too, but it's all there.
Yeah.
If you look at like photography, the cameras are just getting more and more expensive, and your old camera is quite good, so you don't have to change it. And it's a good thing that hi-fi industry doesn't make the same mistake. So having Sound Clever, I think it's quite clever.
So, thank you. Sounds Clever. Room K4, all 4 days. Demi, you're here tomorrow. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for chiming in.
Thank everybody for
Thank you
coming.
very much.
Yep.
Stu, Michael, Luba, thank you, of course.
Thank you.